Your phone buzzed at 3:14 a.m. It wasn't a text from a friend or a late-night work email. It was a burner phone you didn't remember buying, displaying a single GPS coordinate in the middle of the Sonoran Desert. Congratulations, you have just been promoted to lead accountant for a transnational criminal organization. You aren't here for your personality. You aren't here for your integrity. You are here because you are the only person on Earth who can explain how $400 million in revenue vanishes into thin air every quarter. The transition from a desk at a mid-tier accounting firm to the inner sanctum of a cartel is not a slow crawl. It is a violent sprint. You walk into a room smelling of stale tobacco and industrial-grade floor wax. Two men in tactical gear stand by the door. They don't check your ID, they check your pulse. On the mahogany desk sits a MacBook Air, a ledger bound in cracked leather, and a stack of cash thick enough to level a wobbly table. Your first task is simple: reconcile the inventory. The organization moves product through three primary corridors: the Pacific, the Central, and the Gulf. Each corridor has a different tax rate. In the criminal world, we don't call it tax, we call it protection. We call it logistics. We call it the cost of doing business. In 2023, the total illicit drug trade was estimated by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime to be worth over $650 billion annually. Your employer claims a 12% share of that market. Do the math. You are managing a balance sheet larger than the GDP of entire nations. The first problem is volume. You aren't dealing with digital transfers or offshore wires yet. You are dealing with physical weight. A single kilogram of high-purity product costs roughly $25,000 at the wholesale level. By the time it hits the streets of Chicago or New York, that same kilo is sliced, diced, and sold for $120,000. Your job is to bridge the gap between the street price and the wholesale cost without triggering a flag at the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. You open the ledger. The names are placeholders. AB buys 50 units, CD distributes 20 units, EF handles the logistics. The system is decentralized. If you lose one link, the chain stays intact. You are looking at a system designed to survive the death of its own leaders. You start with the front companies. You have a construction firm in Guadalajara, a chain of car washes in Phoenix, an avocado export business that seems to ship empty crates more often than fruit. This is classic money laundering, but at an industrial scale. The car washes are your favorite. They report $15,000 in daily revenue. The math doesn't work. To clean that much cash, you would need to wash a car every 2 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You increase the reported payroll. You invent employees. You pay taxes on phantom wages to ensure the IRS keeps looking the other way. Then comes the smurfing. You take the physical cash and break it down into deposits under $10,000. This avoids the currency transaction reports required by the Bank Secrecy Act. You have 100 people running from bank to bank across 4 states. It is tedious, it is dangerous, it is the only way to get the money into the legitimate banking system. By noon, the adrenaline has worn off. You realize the scale of your error. You look at the P&L statement for the third quarter. There is a missing $4.2 million. You didn't misplace it. You didn't lose it in a trade. A local lieutenant skimmed it off the top of a shipment in Tijuana. You have 2 choices. You report the theft and witness a liquidation, or you eat the loss and adjust the books to balance the ledger. You adjust the books. You reclassify the loss as transportation shrinkage. The cartel operates like any other Fortune 500 company, just with higher stakes and a much more aggressive human resources department. They have a supply chain. They have a customer base. They have competitors. The only difference is the regulation. In the corporate world, you break the law and pay a fine. Here, you break the law and pay with your life. You check the news. A major bust in Laredo just seized 400 kilograms. You look at your spreadsheet. That was your product. The loss is $10 million in inventory. But your employer doesn't care about the product. The product is cheap. The product is infinite. Your employer cares about the root. If the route is burned, you lose millions more in potential revenue. You spend the afternoon drafting a new logistics strategy. You pivot to synthetic narcotics. Fentanyl and methamphetamines are cheaper to produce and easier to hide. A small baggie can contain the same profit margin as an entire shipping container of marijuana. The shift in the market is clear. You are moving from the era of organic agriculture to the era of industrial chemistry. As the sun sets, you feel the weight of the building. The windows have no view. The doors are locked from the outside. You are the most valuable person in the room, which makes you the most dangerous person in the room. You look at the balance sheet. Assets, 1.2 billion. Liabilities, a dozen state-level investigations and one federal task force. Net worth, immeasurable. You realize that you aren't the one running the numbers are running you. There is no retiring from this position. There is only the final audit. When the ledger is finally balanced and the last shipment arrives, you don't get a golden watch or a pension plan. You get a quiet exit. The real question isn't how you manage the money, it's how you manage to convince yourself that you were ever in control. We build systems to categorize the world. We build spreadsheets to quantify our lives. We think that if we can just balance the books, we can rationalize the chaos. But the cartel is a mirror. It reflects the same greed, the same obsession with growth, and the same detachment from human cost that defines the global economy. You aren't a criminal mastermind. You're just an accountant who finally stopped pretending that the numbers were clean. You close the laptop. You lock the ledger. You take the burner phone and drop it into a glass of water. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again, and the day after that, because in a world built on blood money, the only thing more dangerous than being involved is trying to leave.